Marketing Services 3. Now we have found a client that has a problem and we've put together a proposal for that. Now we're going to deal with closing the sale, which is typically how we're going to handle the meeting with the client to present our proposal and discuss it and hopefully close the sale and win the engagement. In order to do this, you start off by understanding the setting. So there can be several different approaches to what the setting may be for this meeting. Your types of presentations include large group presentations. I've been in meetings that had 200 or 300 people in them. And so a large group would be anything above maybe 20, 25. And typically is a presentation where we're going to do more talking to them. We'll try to get some feedback and give them time for questions. But by and large, by the nature of this, just like the nature of a lecture class in a 200-seat auditorium, there's not going to be a lot of interaction. There's not going to be a lot of people on the floor asking questions and stuff. So you have to make it a pretty much a closed presentation that you're prepared to cover all the topics and cover it from the stage. It tends to be somewhat more formal than the others. Small group presentations is much more the norm. It is very normal for presentations for professional services to involve a group of 4 to 20 people from the client side. This normally is going to take place in a meeting room or a boardroom kind of environment. Picture a long table with people sitting around the table and chairs around the outside with a projection screen on one end of the room, and that's typically where you're standing while you're presenting to the group, and one of your people will typically be standing there making the presentation. The people around the table, normally in most of these situations, those different organizations do it differently, but typically the most senior person in the group will sit at the far end of the table facing the screen. Some of his closest people will be sitting next to them, and it'll come down. You should have your people, depending on their roles in this presentation, as if there are chairs available at the table, you can have them sit there. Otherwise, they sit along the wall, and basically based on how senior they are in this presentation activity. Observe that in these kinds of meetings, the people at the table will typically have the people sitting along the walls, and the ones that report to them and that they interact with most will be sitting around them. So there will be some talk back and forth as they will lean back, ask questions, and interact with the people along the walls, as well as with each other at the table. The small group is the more typical kind of thing for these proposals. And your last one is a one-on-one. I sold a lot of projects one-on-one where I had become friends with and familiar with the person that was buying, usually a CEO level person, and we would sit down on their couch or in their office and talk about it. No formal presentation. I might have a letter prepared. I might follow up with a letter later, but just present, this is what I think we should be doing. This is how it should go. Here's what it's going to cost and how we'll bill it. We discuss it, we work it out, and then there's a letter following up to make it all happen. All 3 of these will have the same basic information in them, but they won't necessarily all be presented the same way, and certainly the way in which you handle these presentations is quite differently. In any setting, we're going to identify the buyers and the influencers. There's going to be people in this room who are actually making the buying decision. They're the people that will be on the line saying, yes, let's do this, and we'll authorize it going ahead. But those buyers will have influencers, the people they listen to. And those are your key players. There'll be generally other people in the room, and we're not going to ignore anybody, and we're not going to look down at anybody. But we want to be sure that we have identified the buyers and the influencers, and that we're focused on satisfying their needs coming into this activity. We're going to determine the agenda of the buyers and influencers. It's not at all unusual that they would have differing agendas. They sit in different parts of the organizations, they do things, they have different prejudices, etc. So we're going to understand those agendas, and we need to know that going in. I want to know what they're thinking, and I want to have that information at hand so that as we're preparing our proposal presentation, we can consider, okay, now who's going to be for this, who's going to be against this, how do we balance this out? We've got to win the politics as well as win the nuts and bolts of the proposal. They say there's a saying that in some businesses, who's right trumps what's right, and other businesses, what's right trumps who's right. From my experience, who's right trumps what's right most of the time. So we want to get the content right. We want to be sure that we've got the best content of anybody, but we also have to get the politics right and be sure that we're going to get a fair hearing and we're going to get a chance to move ahead with this thing. We're going to align to those agendas, and if we can't align to everybody's agendas, we're going to know who and why, and we're going to do what we can to soften the blows and to get by that without any major problems. We're going to seek input. Before we ever get in that meeting, we're going to try to have talked to everybody that's going to be in that room, particularly the buyers and influencers, but we'll try to talk to everybody. The key factor here, there's an old adage among lawyers that says when you go to the courtroom, you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. There's been some very famous cases where people violated this rule and got burned because of it. But the same thing kind of happens here. We don't want to go into this room unless we know the answer. We want to know who's for us and who's against us and how this is going to play out. To a very large degree, we want to understand all that before we start talking. We're going to pre-sell. Nobody said that unless you're in some government situations that we can't go share what we're going to be presenting with people individually and in small groups and go over it with them, hear their objections, and pre-sell it to them, explain why we're doing what we're doing, and get them on board before we show up at the meeting. We are going to be prepared. And be prepared covers a bunch of things. First, we'll practice. Now, some people practice by going word for word through the presentation, and this is what we're going to say. That's never worked for me, but I know a lot of my staff did that. But we're going to practice. We're at least going to have a walkthrough so that we know who's saying what, when, who's taking which piece, who's taking what kinds of questions, who's standing and who's sitting, and those kinds of things, so that we look professional and we look like we know what we're doing. We will objection practice. Typically, I would go get somebody from another part of the firm who wasn't on this particular engagement to look over our proposal, have some conversations with us, and then tell us what possible objections they see here. And we would practice responding to those objections so we knew how to handle whatever weak points may be in what we're pitching. We will be on time, except that that's a misnomer. We will not be on time. We will be there ahead of time. Usually for a major presentation, we'll be there about 30 minutes ahead of time at least, never less than 10 minutes ahead of time. If I'm sitting out in their lobby and quietly waiting and they're doing something else, that's fine. If they get free early and send somebody out that says, oh, well, you're here already. If you want to come on, we can come on. We'll come on. We're here to serve them. That's our objective, is to eventually have them as clients and to serve their needs. And we want them to know that we respect their time and we respect them, and we will be on time. We have battled snowstorms and strikes and all kinds of stuff, sometimes meaning that the whole group moved in a day or two early. There's even been a couple of cases in my career where we showed up for the presentation, but the client didn't. We will be there and we will be on time. Those two cases that I'm thinking of, the client was actually extremely impressed that we did that, and that despite lots of reasons not to have made it, we made it. And I actually, in both cases, got it played back to me by the client as a strength on our side. We're going to have the technology ready with backup. Today's technology, you typically are using a laptop computer or some other electronic device like that will be connected to a projector and doing that. So we're going to have multiple copies of the technology. Everybody that we take there is going to have the presentation, and they're going to have the latest presentation, so that if somebody's computer fails or we have some sort of an issue with it, we've got somebody else ready to plug in and go. We will have practice with the technology in that room. We will send somebody down early to be sure that we have all the connection gear necessary and that our software works with theirs and all that kind of thing so it works. Finally, handouts are checked. So normally when you're doing this kind of thing, you probably didn't actually finish out and everybody sign off on the proposal till the afternoon of the day before. So now we've got to produce some number of copies of the proposal document, usually a bound document, a book kind of thing with the plastic bindings. And so the lower level people on the team are going to get tasked to take this to a photocopy place, get it photocopied overnight, and so we've got it the next morning. But what we learned over time is the people that are working the night shift at photocopy places or let's say very frequently, aren't the brightest lights in the chandelier. And things go wrong and machine breaks. So now what we learned to do many years ago was we dispatched two different people to two different places and they put them in to be ready, found out at what time they were going to be ready overnight. So if it was ready at midnight, our people were back at midnight, and then they went page by page through every single page of the handout, because it's not uncommon to get it back and one page is missing or one page is printed upside down or it's bound wrong, this kind of thing. We are not going to hand our clients handouts that are not correct, that are wrong in any way. The two copies of it, now we've got two complete sets. We have two complete sets in case one of these operations just completely craps out on us. I've still got enough to go with. The whole purpose here in this pre-prepared thing is to reinforce that we do it right. We know what we're doing. We've done this a million times. We're professional, and you can count on us. Our presentation itself will be a relaxed but professional presentation. We want to be talking and we want to have interaction. We want to get people talking to us. It's not stiff. We didn't just join the Army, but it's going to be a professional presentation. We will encourage discussion. To the degree possible, I would like to have discussion, and I would like to have our clients' people making our strong points for us, or at least agreeing with us right there in public. That's what we're really after as we go through this thing. And finally, we'll be flexible, particularly in the previously mentioned case. When the clients' people start making our points for us, we don't need to go back over those points when they appear later in the presentation. I can swiftly and easily say, here's this, we've already talked about that, so we'll just move on unless somebody's got a further question on that. The clients appreciate you not wasting their time, and you look like an idiot standing up there talking about something that's already been settled, and you're running the risk that it's going to become unsettled because you're talking about it again.